Welcome to Aging Insights. I'm Melissa Chalker, Deputy Director of the New Jersey Foundation for Aging. The Foundation's mission is to enable seniors to live with independence and dignity in their communities. Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging to provide information and resources to boomers, seniors, and caregivers, the primary focus being to share important information and connect people to community-based programs. Today we're going to be talking about hearing loss. Our guests will explain the different types, share some important information and help, such as devices, and give tips for better communication. I'm joined today by Maryrose Applebaum, Director of Hearing Aid Services at Montclair State University and the lead audiologist for the New Jersey Hearing Aid Project, and Maryrose McInerney, Professor of Audiology at Montclair State University, right? Audiology faculty. So I thank you both really for joining me to talk about this important topic. I think it's great to share with our audience just what all is involved in hearing loss and what help is there, and how to better understand it if they have a problem or if a family member does. So I appreciate that. And to start us off, Maryrose, I am going to begin with you to kind of help us figure out the ins and outs of this and start off with defining hearing loss for people.
So usually when we talk about hearing loss, we talk about like the type, the degree, and the configuration.
Okay.
About 48 million Americans actually have a hearing loss, and about half of the individuals over the age of 65 have a hearing loss. So that's really quite a large group.
Sure.
So really when we're talking about them, we really are talking about a mild hearing loss, high frequency hearing losses. So we really are talking about the configuration, so that they hear some sounds, but they don't hear other sounds. They may hear vowels, but they don't hear consonants. So things are not clear to them. They feel like people are mumbling, or that it's not a clear signal.
So I know a lot of people think about hearing impaired people who might be born with hearing loss, and so there's a distinct difference between that and someone who might experience hearing loss later in life, right?
Right, exactly. So those individuals that are born with hearing loss, they certainly, they receive services as a child. It's going to affect their language development. But now we do have early intervention, so that really the information and the progress that we've made in that area is significant. But really what we're talking, I believe today, really are acquired hearing losses. Individuals that gradually decrease their hearing over time. So when we think about that, we say that half the individuals have a hearing loss over the age of 65, but really your hearing gradually decreases anywhere from the age of 25, 28 on. So that by the time you're 50 years of age, you may feel that I'm not hearing quite as good in a group situation or in a cocktail party. People may be mumbling. Why aren't the grandchildren speaking a little bit louder? Why aren't they speaking a little bit clearer? And those are the kinds of hearing losses that we really focus on when we think about the just gradual aging process.
Yes. So you're right. We do want to talk quite a bit today about acquired hearing loss, as you called it. And what I think we might be interested in learning about is exactly what are some of the reasons why. You said as early as 25, some people could start experiencing gradual hearing loss. So
it's just really the aging process that does occur, that gradually your hearing decreases from the high frequencies going down into the higher frequencies, into the high frequencies, into the mid frequencies. But then other things can also affect it, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, a lot of your medical conditions that are metabolic and or have to do with circulation, smoking, noise-induced hearing losses. All of those can also affect your hearing. But typically, there's a comorbidity there, so that, in other words, that we have this hearing loss that gradually decreases. We don't really notice it. We feel that, maybe it's just that, I'm not paying attention as well as I used to. And then we also have, on top of that, this comorbidity of these other medical conditions.
So someone could experience hearing loss as a result of, sort of this normal aging process, but they could also have, as you said, exposure to loud music. I mean, is that something that people should be concerned about?
Yes, absolutely. And certainly, with, as people listen to loud music, we are more and more concerned about that. So you really do want to, there are controls on your iPhones now that basically sets the volume. We try to educate teenagers. We're educating all the students at Montclair as far as what is a good listening level to be able to listen to music, because over time, it's not going to happen right away, but over time, that effect of that noise will affect your hearing.
Sure.
And in addition to the aging process and that noise, then the combination will be affected. The difficulty is that like I keep on saying the aging process, and nobody wants to think about that, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to think that they're getting older. But when we put it into perspective and we say that, well, anywhere from the age of 25 on, we're gradually decreasing our hearing, it makes a little bit more sense as far as that this is something that naturally is going to occur. And it's going to occur and it's going to affect everybody. You know, in other words, if I have a hearing difficulty or if I am not hearing all of the consonant sounds clear, I may hear the word, instead of saying, you know, do you want a sip of my water, I may hear you say, do you want a sip of my order? And then that's going to change the conversation completely. So now my conversation with your conversation, you know, communication, hearing is communicating and having a conversation. So now it's affected me, it's affected you, and it's affected everybody else around us. So that's, I think that's the emphasis that I try to make is that it's not just like a hearing loss or a little hearing loss that I can cope with, but how does it affect my communication? How does it affect my surroundings? How does it affect me dealing with my surroundings as well as people dealing with me?
And as you talk about all that, you know, I'm wondering, you know, how can someone recognize that those signs are starting to happen? What are some ways people can really begin to realize this is happening at a point they can get some help for it?
So if somebody does have something called tinnitus, in other words, ringing in their ears, that certainly is something, you know, that's a red flag. But other little things, like I had mentioned, like people sound like they're mumbling. The TV doesn't sound as clear. I need to turn up the TV a little bit louder than somebody else. From a distance, people don't sound that clear. I may feel that I hear the person in a normal conversation, but then when I go out to a restaurant, I'm not hearing that well. The noise is really bothering me. These restaurants are too noisy these days. These are all signs that you may have a hearing difficulty, and it may be affecting those, what we call those high frequencies or your consonant sounds, which are typically softer sounds and more high frequency than a vowel sound. So like a sound versus an ah sound, it's a higher frequency and it's also softer, so it's going to be more difficult to hear. And then it's even more difficult to hear when you have all that noise on top of it, like in the restaurant. That type of thing.
I wanted to ask you about that because I know people who, you know, tend to go places and they have trouble when there's background noise, like you're talking about at a party or at a loud restaurant, you know, that background. What is it that causes that?
So that is, you know, there's a couple of things that can cause it, but one of them is because of where the hearing loss is. So, you know, when we talked about the configuration of the loss, it's not that, you know, that all sounds are basically you have a hearing loss in. Some sounds you may have more of a hearing loss than other sounds. So that's going to affect it, as well as people's ability to process and be able to separate out the speech versus the noise. So those are all things that we can test for and that we can make recommendations as far as what we would, you know, as far as the therapy plan, and then also as far as assistive listening devices and hearing aids and things like that.
So if someone starts to notice some of these things, it sounds like from what you've said that, you know, obviously just like any other disease or other issues people face, that it's going to affect everybody differently. Not everyone's going to experience hearing loss the same way. But if they start to notice some of these things, the ringing in their ear or the difficulty hearing or sounding like people are mumbling, what should they do? So
they should be seen by an audiologist and receive an audiological evaluation. The audiologist then would determine if they also need to be seen by an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Every person really should think about getting their hearing tested from the age of 50 on, basically, to get that baseline, and then you'll know as far as, okay, how often do I actually have to get my hearing tested, and what kinds of things can I do? Because there are things to do. You know, Dr. Applebaum is going to talk about a lot of the assistive listening devices and things like that, but there are other things to do as far as like where are you going to sit yourself in a room? You know, are you going to sit yourself near doorways, or are you going to sit yourself near a wall that's going to be much quieter? So there are things to do that an audiologist can really help you with. You know, for us to be facing face to face. If I was a distance away and I turned my, you know, my head the other way, it would be much more difficult for you to hear me and to understand me. And that's the essence of this kind of hearing loss. It's really an understanding. It's not, in other words, I know you're speaking when I have that mild hearing loss as the hearing decreases, but I don't know all the things that you might be saying. So I'm filling in the blanks. Filling in those blanks takes time, it takes energy, and you know, it's tiresome. Plus sometimes I can't fill in the blanks because I have all this other noise going on or distraction and things like that.
It can be very difficult, and you know, a lot of times we see people that might isolate themselves and stop going out because of those issues. And if instead they can get some help and figure out how to better hear and communicate with the people in their lives, then that would be beneficial.
Exactly. And I think that you know that's a really good point. That those are the direct effects of hearing loss: is isolation, frustration, sometimes depression. You know, people might feel, you know, especially if you have the older population, people might feel that cognitively they are not functioning as well.
Right.
They may feel themselves that, you know, like, is something going on?
Right.
You know, that, you know, how did I miss that? And it's actually, you know, really everyone should stop and say, you know what, let's get the hearing checked first, and then we'll go to the next step.
So I just want to repeat for our audience so they hear it again. You recommend at 50 people start getting regular hearing evaluations?
Certainly a baseline. And then and then the recommendation, depending on if there is any difficulty at all, they would make the recommendation for every 2 years or every 5 years afterwards.
Right. And, you know, in addition to testing hearing, as you said, audiologists can give tips, you know, on ways to better communicate with your friends and family members and even, you know, other doctors. You know,
Exactly.
this could come into play for senior. We talked about isolating themselves, but they might also avoid going to doctors if they have trouble hearing that doctor because they can't explain or they don't know the advice that that cardiologist is giving back to them about their heart problem because they can't hear it as well. Right,
exactly. And what happens is that, you know, like sometimes they'll go to a doctor and the doctor will be speaking and they're speaking in words that they may not be familiar with. So the context clues are much more difficult to put together, right?
Yeah.
And so then what they do is that they're nodding and they're nodding, and then, you know, one of their, a sibling or, you know, one of their children may say, well, what did they say? Well, I'm not really sure. And then the siblings, you know, or the child sits there and says, well, what's up, Mom? They're questioning them, right? But it's really because they weren't able to put it all together because they didn't hear all of the words clearly and be able to discriminate all the different words.
Right. And so are there some signs or signals that family members can pick up on if someone in their life is experiencing hearing loss and maybe isn't recognizing it themselves or isn't admitting it?
So again, you know, it's really if they are missing clues, especially numbers. You know, meet me at 7 o'clock, things like that. Telephone numbers. If they're having a hard time hearing you on the telephone, if it just doesn't seem like they're putting it all together. You know, you're having a conversation and they're not putting it all together, and/or that they basically back off. You know, an individual with a hearing loss knows that they're not getting it all. Basically, they don't know why, but they don't. You know, they know that something's off, so they may back off of the conversation. They may move back in the conversation. If they're not engaged in the conversation, we're about to go into Thanksgiving. It's a great time to be checking in. You know, to be thinking ourselves as well as everyone else. As far as like, are they, are they engaged? You know, like, are they, like, what's going on there? And you can't predict if it's just that they're not engaged or it's just such an easy thing to check out, to have an audiological evaluation. It takes about a half an hour. It's a very easy thing to check out. Medicare does cover audiological evaluations. So it's like, do it. Because you really, the quality of life that the person can have, plus their entire family, can change drastically.
Sure, absolutely. So I think that's a great tip that over these coming holidays, people should pay attention to the older adults in their lives and figure out if they should recommend that they see an audiologist or recognize that in yourself. And if it's loud to hear everybody over your holiday meal, then maybe you should consider consider that. So thank you for sharing all that with us. Because you've kind of talked about the help that people can get, I want to switch and talk to Marys about some of this fun stuff you brought for us to look at, because you can talk to us a little bit more about some of the interventions. You know, we heard about audiologists maybe can give tips about, where you sit in a room and how to better listen or how to better communicate with people to understand, but there are also devices that help people do that. So where would you like to start?
Well, I think we can start with that item closest to you. And that's an alarm clock as well as a smoke detector. So people who are hearing impaired, may sleep through an alarm. So this can go under their pillow.
Oh, okay.
When the alarm goes off, it would shake, as well as there's a very loud alarm.
Okay.
So that's very important for anybody
Yeah,
with
so
this.
this is doubles as an alarm clock and as a fire alarm. So they
Yes.
can set it just to what time they want to wake up in the morning, and it's louder and a different. And this vibrates for the alarm as well.
Yes.
For the alarm
yes,
clock.
it can
part?
vibrate
Okay.
for anything.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And then that's great. So how does it you would plug
Just
it in?
plug it in
right.
and set it up.
Right.
Yes.
And then it has, I assume, some way to connect with your smoke alarm so that
the
you
smoke
would
detector,
it would
right.
know when there was a fire and that would wake you up from
So
that. That's
basically,
terrific.
yeah, we're talking about safety alerting devices. So this is more for somebody with a more significant hearing
Right.
loss than the early onset
Sure,
one.
sure. Or maybe even just that deep sleeper in your life.
Yes.
Great. What else do we?
Telephones,
Yes.
huge part of everybody's life. So this is a phone
Okay.
where you can make the ringtone louder,
Okay.
as well as you can make the volume on the handset louder. So this is very good for anybody who's hearing
Right, I
impaired.
see this button that says amplify. So is that where they would really change
Yeah, over here is going to be the tone for the
Tone.
ring, and over here is going to be the volume that they hear through the handset. And these come in different strength phones, different decibel levels. So
Oh, okay.
depending on how hearing impaired somebody is.
And their doctor would know how to recommend what decibel they need
Yes,
to hear.
yes, the audiologist would do that. And in
Right.
addition, many of these phones have large numbers.
Yeah, I
of-
was going to
so
say
if
it's also
there's
great
visual
because
impairment.
it has the large buttons. I like large button phones too.
Now, there's also something called captioned phones.
Yes.
Where the person who's hearing impaired just speaks into the phone regularly, and the person who's speaking to them speaks into the phone, but it's also captioned. And
Right. So so it would show a screen on top of the
top of
phone,
that.
so you could read what the person on the other line was saying into you.
Right. And this type of phone can be set up with a regular phone line or through an internet provider.
Oh, okay.
And the state of New Jersey does provide free captioning. The phone itself, if you meet certain economic requirements, the state will also provide the phone for you. Otherwise, you would need to purchase
Right.
that yourself.
But the state provides the service for
Right.
free of the captioning itself
Right.
once you've purchased the phone.
Right, and that information is available on the website of the Division of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing for the state
Terrific.
of New Jersey.
That's great.
And one last item for the phone is this is something that somebody could carry with them and
Okay.
just slide it right over the receiver of a phone, and it has a little volume control. So
Okay.
that's portable if they're going places and they're not sure whether or not they'll be able to
So would
use
this
the
be
phone.
used with? Could it be used with a cell phone?
This would be used with any type of landline phone.
landline phone,
Cell phones are not necessarily that compatible.
Right, but
with
if you
hearing
had like a
aids.
cordless phone in your house and you
Right.
were around, you could carry that with you, and then you could amplify the volume of,
Yes.
of a cordless phone,
Phone,
with
yes.
that. Okay,
Yes.
great.
Okay. Then, in terms of talking to doctors, this we don't have the actual item here, but you can see it's something that almost looks like a small transistor radio,
Or those who remember from the 90s, a Walkman.
a Walkman, yes. And so the hearing impaired person is going
Right.
to wear a headset or earbuds, and the doctor would hold on to this, and there's a microphone and a volume control. And this is also very good if somebody's in the hospital for a short
Yeah.
stay, and they don't have to worry about bringing their hearing aids, which are expensive. And
Sure, and you worry about in a facility like a hospital or a rehab center about
Right.
losing hearing aids because they're very small.
Right, and this is nice just for physicians to keep in their office in case somebody comes in.
Sure.
That they can
And this could also be
accommodate
great,
them.
you know, when we talked, you know, about hearing, you know, grandchildren, you know, if sometimes they speak softly, maybe get them to speak into that. You know, it's good for, you know, not only communicating with the professionals in your life and doctors and stuff that you have to visit, but even family who are visiting.
Right, and this also very much overcomes the background noise situation.
Okay.
Because the microphone is right up to the speaker's mouth. All right, another issue for hearing impaired people is not hearing the doorbell ring. So this is a flashing light that can be set up.
Oh, okay.
So they would see the light.
Much like a regular doorbell, this would go on the outside and people would push
Right.
that button, and then in addition to making a noise, it would light up. And so
Yes.
they could mount that somewhere in the house where it would
Where
be
they would
easy
see
for
it.
them to see it when the doorbell
Exactly.
rings. Great.
Okay, then there's a lot in the FDA right now going on about something called personal sound amplifying products.
Oh.
And these are called PSAPs. And of course, I have to be able to get it open. So this is almost like a precursor to a hearing aid. This is for somebody with a mild loss. I would
Okay.
suggest if anybody gets one that they do make an appointment with an audiologist to make sure that it's not too loud, because if it's too loud, it could damage your hearing further, or it may be amplifying the wrong areas. So
Right.
if somebody does decide to purchase this, they have to be careful.
Right.
And
So we
basically,
should probably say that with all of this stuff, it's best to consult an
Always.
audiologist before you just go out and buy something to help with your hearing, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So this would go in the person's ear.
Okay.
So not unlike those early telephone Bluetooth.
Yeah.
And this can go on the table and can point towards the speaker. So this
Okay.
is great for a restaurant for overcoming that background noise.
Sure.
Not as good as a hearing aid, though, I have to
but
say.
this is that step for somebody who
Somebody-
doesn't have as severe of a hearing
Hearing
loss.
loss.
They're just, experiencing a little bit of difficulty, and this might help them to overcome, especially, like you said, in a public place like a restaurant.
Right. So there are websites and magazines, and these are just a few magazines that have many different devices for people with hearing impairment. And if you went online and looked up their catalogs, there'd be
Right.
many other catalogs you could look at as well.
Yes, I'm sure there's an infinite amount of things that are
Yes.
available to help, right?
Yes. And then finally, hearing aids.
Yes.
So hearing aid you want to get from a licensed audiologist. You want it to be verified. There's something called speech mapping, and that
Okay.
tells us that the sound is not too loud to damage your hearing. It's loud enough to make normal conversation audible, and also will amplify soft sounds like whispered speech so that you'll know somebody is talking to you.
Right.
They come in many different sizes. This is the traditional behind the ear hearing aid, which is
Right.
what I think a lot of people still think about. And this is really most common at this stage of the game for somebody with a significant loss.
Right. And so, just so people understand who maybe haven't seen it, the clear part would sit.
This is the
in your-
hearing aid.
Right.
This would sit over the ear.
Over the ear.
And the sound would channel into the ear through this is called
Right.
the ear mold. And it can have a volume control, as well as a button for different listening programs like listening in quiet or listening in noise. Then we have custom hearing aids. I am wearing one in this ear right
See,
now, which is
we
very
didn't even know.
small.
You can't even see
Right.
it.
So that's
Oh,
that.
wow.
And they do come in larger sizes as well. And the choice of which size to get is going to be a conversation between the patient and the audiologist. For some people, dexterity issues slightly bigger is easier to use.
Sure.
And some people, the cosmetics may be more important. The larger hearing aids doesn't have to be this large, may have multiple microphones, which help listening
Right.
in noise.
And I'm sure also coming into conversation will be the cost, because I'm sure that depending on the different type and style, there's a different cost associated as well, right?
Usually there are different technology levels available in each
In each size. Okay.
And then very common today is something called a receiver in the ear, a receiver in the canal hearing aid. And I'm wearing that on this ear, and they're pretty invisible,
Yeah.
which is why people like them. They just blend right in.
Yep.
And it's very, very small, and it has microphones, and it may have a button as well.
Right.
Some of these hearing aids can be paired with what we call a remote microphone.
Okay.
So similar to what we're wearing to catch the voice, they are paired with the microphone. So for somebody who's really having problems in noise or at a distance, the speaker can be wearing that microphone,
Okay.
and it will stream directly into the person's
And
hearing
I assume
aid.
that's a wireless setup?
It's wireless now. Yes. In addition, there are a few hearing aids on the market that are iPhone or Android compatible. And the iPhone version, again, the phone call can stream directly into the person's hearing aid,
Wow.
as well as you'll have an app on the phone that works as a remote. It can change volume, it could change pitch, it could change those programs like listening in quiet
Sure.
or listening in noise. One company has a remote that you can put on the table similar to that. And that will also stream the person across the table, their voice directly into your hearing aid, helping with the largest problem of hearing in noise and hearing at a distance.
Yeah.
So they are better than they've ever been before. They're not perfect.
Right.
They make the most of what hearing you have left, which we would know from your hearing test.
Right.
And many people with hearing aids will still use assistive devices because in combination, it becomes very powerful.
Sure, especially if your hearing loss progresses to a higher level and then the hearing aid is working, but in certain situations you might need like an amplifier or still a caption phone or something that would help to better hear with those things. Terrific. And so it's really been great that you've been able to share all of these devices with us. I know that you also have some resources that we're going to put up on the screen for folks so they can find out some more information about where else they can seek help and where there might be assistance for those things.
In particular, the New Jersey Hearing Aid Project for people who are residents of New Jersey, 65 years of age and older, and there are economic requirements, but the state will, if once they apply and they're accepted, they will get a refurbished used hearing aid through the state for those people who can't afford them.
Sure, because it is, you know, all of these devices are great, but there is a cost associated with them, and so sometimes if you need to get help with that financially, there's that available. It is great that you pointed out that the audiology evaluation itself is covered by Medicare, but devices are not, and so that's something that there is other help for.
Yes. Also, the state has centers where you can try different assistive devices. And they also through the Department of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, they will help people purchase assistive devices if they cannot afford it.
Terrific. So that's all really great information for people to be able to know how to recognize hearing loss and maybe where to seek help in terms of an audiologist, and then what kind of devices they can get to assist them with better communicating, not only with their family and friends, but also with the medical professionals that they need to see for other issues. So I really thank you both for taking time. I know you're both very busy, so it's great that you could spend some time with us to share this with our audience, and hopefully if people out there need help, they're going to call an audiologist and get an evaluation and maybe some of these devices as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank all of you for sharing your time with us today. Aging Insights is produced by the New Jersey Foundation for Aging and made possible by donations to the foundation. To become a sponsor for an Aging Insights program, please go to our website at www.njfoundationforaging.org or call us in the office at 609-421-0206. All of the previous shows may be viewed on our website. And we'd also like to remind you to find out about senior services in your area, contact your county office on aging. Their numbers are also on our website, or you can call the state hotline, which is 1-877-222-3737. Thank you for watching this episode of Aging Insights, and remember, aging is everyone's business.